Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something fascinating. It's about conservation policy, human habits, pets, all through the lens of a new study.
That's right. It's titled Effectiveness of Legislative Tools to Stop Biological Invasions. Freshwater Turtles Invasion in Europe as a Study Case, led by Rato.
And we're going to dig into it. The big question is, did this major EU regulation, the one banning the trade of the, let's face it, notorious red-eared slider turtle, did it actually work?
It sounds straightforward, doesn't it? Ban the bad guy, problem solved.
Yeah, but we're talking about Trachemys scripta, the red-eared slider, a huge invasive species problem. And regulating something like the pet trade, well, it's often trickier than it looks.
Absolutely. And this isn't just an academic exercise. We're looking at how effective our policies really are when they meet, biological reality. Invasive species are a massive threat.
Right. They hit biodiversity, economies.
And even human health. That red-eared slider, T. scripta, it's a known carrier for salmonella. So if the law designed to stop its spread isn't working, we really need to understand why.
Okay, let's set the scene. Freshwater turtles. People love them as pets, right? They buy them when they're tiny, cute little hatchlings.
Super popular. But that's the start of the problem.
Because they don't stay tiny and cute forever. They live a long time, they get big, sometimes aggressive.
And then owners get overwhelmed, or maybe just irresponsible.
And what happens? They release them, maybe into a park pond, a local river, thinking they're doing the turtle a favor.
Exactly, the classic pet abandonment cycle. And T. scripta is incredibly adaptable. Once it's out there in a European river or lake, it causes real trouble.
How so? What does it actually do to the ecosystem?
Well, it competes directly with native European turtles. For food, obviously, but also, really importantly, for basking spots. Those sunny logs and rocks, they need to warm up to thermoregulate.
Ah, okay. So it pushes native species out.
It does. They can be quite aggressive feeders, too. And then there's the disease angle. We mentioned salmonella, yes, but also things like leptospira, chlamydia. It's a genuine ecological and public health risk.
So, faced with this, the EU decided it had to step in. What was the actual policy tool they used?
The main framework is this big piece of legislation, EU Regulation 1143/2014. It basically set up a list of invasive alien species of union concern.
Meaning species that needed action across the whole EU.
Pretty much. And in 2016, a follow-up regulation, Law 141/2016, specifically added Trachemys scripta, the red-eared slider, to that list.
Okay, so from 2016, trading them became illegal across the EU.
That was the idea. Cut off the supply, stop the new introductions via the pet trade, and hopefully, over time, get a handle on the wild populations.
And this study, the Rato paper, is looking back to see if that actually happened, covering quite a long period, right?
Yeah, a really useful time frame. They looked at data from 1998 all the way through to 2022. So well before the ban and for a good few years after it came into effect.
That gives it some real analytical power. But how do you even track something like this? You need data on turtles coming in and data on turtles spreading out?
Two big data challenges, definitely. For the coming in part, the supply, they turned to the CEATS database.
CEATS. That's the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. But wait, is the red-eared slider endangered?
No, it's not. But under EU law, imports of many species, including this one, have to be tracked and reported into the CEATS system by customs. So it gives you a solid record of the legal international imports. It's a measure of what scientists call propagule pressure.
Propagule pressure, like the number of new potential invaders arriving.
Exactly, the official count, at least, of animals being legally brought in.
Okay, so that covers the imports. What about tracking the spread in the wild? Where are they actually showing up?
For that, they use platforms like GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. This thing's amazing. It compiles observation records from all over.
And a lot of that comes from citizen science, right? People just spotting a turtle and logging it on an app.
Increasingly, yes. Hikers, bird watchers, just regular people out and about, they snap a photo, upload it, and it becomes a data point showing where the species is established.
But that raises a potential issue, doesn't it? As smartphones and these apps get more popular, aren't you just bound to get more records, even if the turtle population isn't actually growing faster? More people looking means more sightings.
That's a really critical point and a common challenge in ecology using this kind of data. The researchers were aware of this. They used some pretty sophisticated statistics to handle it.
How so?
They used something called linear mixed models, LMMs. These models are designed to try and separate out different influencing factors, so they could attempt to account for that general increase in reporting effort over time to isolate the actual impact of the 2016 ban itself.
Okay, that makes sense. Trying to filter out the noise. And they didn't only look at the red-eared slider, did they? I think you mentioned something else.
No, and this was really clever. They tracked T-scripta imports and wild records, but they also tracked imports and wild records for all other freshwater turtles combined as a separate group
Ah, setting up a comparison. Why?
to test for substitution. If you ban the most popular pet turtle, do people just switch to buying a different kind of turtle, potentially creating a new problem?
Right, the market just finds an alternative. Okay, I see where this is going. So let's get to the results, the big reveal. Did the EU ban work? What did the import data show?
Well, on that specific front, stopping international imports, it was honestly a huge success. The CITES data showed imports of T-scripta into the EU basically plummeted after 2016.
Plummeted, like significantly.
Dramatically. And eventually, the legal international trade just stopped, completely ceased. Countries like Spain, Portugal, Belgium, historically the big importers, they weren't bringing them in legally anymore. The ban worked on paper, statistically significant, mission accomplished for border control.
Wow. Okay, so the legislation itself, the trade ban part, was effective. It shut down the pipeline of new legal imports. Sounds like a win.
It sounds like it. A clear legislative victory.
But I'm sensing a but coming. What about the turtles already living wild in Europe? Did stopping the imports slow their spread?
And that's where the story turns. Despite cutting off those new imports, the number of T-scripta records in the wild across the EU, it just kept going up after 2016.
Kept increasing, even with no new ones legally coming in.
Yes. The trade ban had essentially minimal effect on the populations already established out there.
So the law closed the front door, but the invaders were already inside, multiplying and spreading through the house.
That's a pretty good analogy. It really highlights the problem with being reactive. These turtles live for decades. The populations released before 2016 were already breeding in the wild. There were confirmed reports from Italy, from Spain.
They established breeding populations.
Wow. Yeah. So they just kept dispersing, spreading naturally. The ban didn't touch that existing self-sustaining problem. And the countries with the highest densities of these wild turtles, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Spain, they're all EU members, where the invasion was already well underway before 2016.
Okay, so the ban was too late for the established populations. Now, let's talk about that substitution idea. What happened when people couldn't buy red-eared sliders anymore?
This is where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit alarming for policy. The market reacted almost immediately.
How?
The researchers found a sharp, statistically significant increase in imports of other freshwater turtles into the EU right after the 2016 ban kicked in.
So people just switched. The demand was still there.
Exactly. The demand for a pet turtle didn't just evaporate. It shifted to whatever similar species were still legal and available.
Yeah.
The market found substitutes.
What kinds of turtles are we talking about? Are these harmless alternatives or...
Well, that's the concern. The study identified some of the main substitutes. Things like the false map turtle, Graptomys pseudogeographica, the Chinese pond turtle, Moremys rivesii, the Chinese softshell turtle, Pelodiscus sinensis.
And imports of these specific species went up.
Significantly. They peaked around 2018 in the EU countries.
Okay, so more different kinds of turtles started coming in. Did that translate into them showing up in the wild too?
Yes. And this is the crucial link. The analysis found that the only thing that significantly explained the later increase in wild sightings of these other turtle species was the earlier increase in their imports.
Wow. So the ban directly, though unintentionally, led to new potential invasions.
It looks very much like it facilitated the introduction of these alternative species. The legislation sort of backfired in that sense. It closed one door but opened several others.
And you could actually see the timeline playing out, like a delay between when people bought these new turtles and when they started appearing in ponds.
Absolutely. There was a clear lag. Imports of these other turtles peaked, say 2016 to 2018, but the wild records for those same species only started shooting up exponentially around 2019, maybe a bit later.
A few years gap.
Right, which fits perfectly with the pet ownership cycle. You buy a small turtle, maybe like that Chinese pond turtle, Moremys rivesii, which apparently grows quite fast.
Okay.
A couple of years later, it's not so small anymore. It's bigger, needs more care. Maybe it's messy.
And the owner releases it.
Exactly. So the ban inadvertently created this pipeline for new species introductions, potentially bringing in new risks like hybridization with native turtles or different diseases, trading one known problem for several unknown ones.
That's quite an unintended consequence. Okay, so we have the three main findings. Import ban worked. Wild spread continued, and this really worrying substitution effect. But let's be rigorous here. What about the limitations? No study is perfect, especially with big data sets like CITES and GBF,
Definitely important to acknowledge. A major limitation is that CEAS only tracks the legal international trade.
meaning it misses.
It misses potentially huge chunks of the picture. Trade within the EU, between member states. Non-traditional sales channels, think social media, online forums, e-commerce, which are massive now, and of course any illegal trade or black market activity for red-eared sliders that might have popped up after the ban. The CITES data wouldn't see any of that.
Right. So the success in stopping trade might be overstated if illegal trade picked up. What about the GBIF side, the citizen science data?
We touched on it earlier, the potential bias from increasing reporting effort over time. More people using apps doesn't automatically mean more turtles.
Even though the models tried to account for it.
They did try using those LMMs, but it's always hard to fully disentangle that trend. So the authors are careful to say their results likely represent the minimum scale of the invasion. Lots of animals probably go unreported.
Okay, understood. So stepping back, what does this whole story tell policymakers in the EU and maybe globally? It sounds like the whole approach of waiting until a species is already a problem is fundamentally flawed.
It really screams reactive, not proactive. The legislation kicks in years, often decades, after a species has become established and is causing damage. And the current EU list, it still doesn't include many other species already sold in pet shops that have, high invasive potential. They could easily be the next T. scripta.
So how do you fix that? How do you get ahead of the curve instead of constantly playing catch up?
Well, the authors make a strong case for a policy shift. They argue against this single EU-wide bad list. The EU is ecologically diverse, right?
Very. Mediterranean climates, alpine boreal.
Exactly. So maybe a species that's a terror in Spain wouldn't even survive a winter in Finland. They suggest developing invasive species lists that are tailored to specific biogeographic regions within the EU.
A more targeted approach.
Right. Focus the effort where the risk is real. And crucially, they say this needs to be paired with much better control of internal trade within the EU and serious public awareness campaigns. You have to stop people releasing pets in the first place.
That makes sense. Regional lists, tighter internal controls, and education. It sounds much more comprehensive.
It moves towards a more proactive stance.
So, boiling it all down from this deep dive, the big takeaway seems to be that just stopping imports isn't enough once an invasion is rolling. And if you don't think about how people and markets will react, your policy can actually make things worse through substitution.
That's the core message. It's a powerful lesson. Banning one popular species without anticipating the demand shift is basically inviting trouble with the next one.
Which leads to that final thought.
Yeah, the authors really push for what they call a horizon scanning approach. Before you ban species X, you need to look at species Y and Z, which are currently legal and traded, and figure out if they have the biological traits, fast growth, hardy, breed easily, that make them likely candidates to replace species X in the market and then in the wild.
Proactively identifying the next potential threat before the ban creates the opening.
Exactly. Because if you only focus on the current problem, like the red-eared slider was, you're almost guaranteeing the next crisis. It really makes you think, doesn't it? What other pets, birds, fish, reptiles, mammals even, are out there right now popular in the trade, maybe getting a bit too big or difficult for their owners?
Just waiting for that moment of release to become the next ecological headache.
That's the question we need to be asking. That's the gap this study really highlights.